From the crossroads of the Ozarks, this is P.I.D. Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we are so very glad that you've joined us yet again. We haven't scared you off yet. Give us time.
Yes, we're working on that.
Oh, we are.
Before we dive in, please take a moment to download our app. Get our free app, which is available for iOS, Android, Amazon, Kindle, Fire phones, and tablets. You can even get the app for Roku or Apple TV if you want to just throw this audio podcast up to the big screen. But it not only gives you all of that, we've got a Bible module in there, so you can read along with us when we do our weekly Bible studies on Sunday. You can have it read to you. It's an audio Bible, and other stuff in there as well. Calendar of our upcoming studies, calendar of our upcoming events.
Blogs.
Yeah, link to our store and the blog. Yes, every Wednesday putting out a new article. So all of that, and you'll find it at gilberthouse.org/app or pidradio.com/app. Either way, that'll get you right there.
Apptastic.
Absolutely.
This is your opportunity. I can't think of any other jokes that are appertain.
Or appropriate.
Oh,
we are abjectly.
We've lost them now.
One of the oldest podcasts on the interwebs. We've sometimes been intermittent in our schedule. Sometimes we've gone 5 days a week. Sometimes we've gone like twice a year. But we are still here. Going on next month will be 18 years.
Good grief. Can you imagine that?
Not 18 years ago. I didn't think we'd be doing it for 18 years. But I certainly didn't think we would be doing it as a full-time vocation. And the Lord has really opened that door for us. And it's through you, listener, that this is possible. And we thank you for that.
It truly is. Thank you so many of you. And if you are thinking about perhaps helping us, stay tuned, because at the very end of this podcast, we will talk to you about our opportunity for you to build barn better.
Yes, this is, of course, a play on the famous, now infamous slogan of the World Economic Forum. It's been adopted by everyone from Joe Biden to Pope Francis.
Much hackneyed slogan.
So we've modified it, and we plan to build barn better in 2023.
Yeah,
I'll tell you about that later.
The Chinese are building balloon better.
That's true. Last Saturday night's SNL Cold Open was really funny. And they have started poking fun at the Biden administration. And that was when Saturday Night Live was actually funny. Back
when
in
they
the
went
day.
after everybody.
Right. Left, right, didn't matter. It was all fair game. And the left has, for the most part, lost its sense of humor, but certainly during the Trump administration, the left, there were certain things thou darest not mock, because that meant you were a mega MAGA troublemaker. And so they seem to be swinging back a little bit, which may only indicate that the power brokers inside D.C. have decided Joe Biden should not run again. But anyway, the point is, it was pretty funny having the Asian cast member play the Chinese balloon after being shot down.
I know that it was the interview with the balloon. You know, in supposed water, just sitting there in his little balloon costume. It was very funny.
So
By the way,
are you fat shaming me? I'm a balloon. This is how I look.
Yesterday, there was something else that was shot down.
Yeah, I've not seen anything yet on the identification. They're just calling it an object.
About the size of a small car.
Yeah.
Is what they're saying. So I don't know.
But unlike the previous balloon, which was at about 60,000 feet, which is above the level of commercial air traffic, this one at about 30,000 feet, excuse me, was a potential threat to commercial air traffic, so they shot it down. But as you know, this week I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, who's written a couple of books now on the prophetic role of China in the end times. Alliance of Evil, which is really China and Russia, but then Kings of the East, his most recent books, focuses on China. And it's not just its geopolitical role in 2023, but its prophetic role in the end times.
Bob is amazing. The Lord has put him in a position where he gets to see what's going on from an insider's point of view. And yet, because he's a believer, he can bridge that gap for us.
Remarkable, and he even said this to me privately, that he's amazed that the government has not tried to stop him from appearing on programs regularly. And he even let me know that, look, as often as you want me to come on the 5 and 10 program for Skywatch TV, I'll do it. but he's also a regular guest on Fox News. He talks to Neil Cavuto a lot. He's on TVT, which is a Turkish television network.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they have him on a lot, and they have him commenting on the situation in Ukraine.
I take it it's an English language one.
Yes, but obviously very pro-Erdogan, pro-government.
Oh, of course. Otherwise,
channel.
it wouldn't be on.
Correct. But he doesn't pull punches. Bob is very open about what he believes and the role that he believes Russia and China play. And it may be that the government finds some use in that, but Bob is not tailoring his message to please the DC insiders, because he's been very open about the role of the occult and witchcraft among certain elements inside our political elite class. So it's remarkable that he's been placed where he is. We pray for Bob a lot because he still has access to men and women inside the Pentagon.
Yes.
He's not. He is retired from the U.S. Army, but he works for a contractor that advises the Pentagon on a number of issues. So his access to the halls of power is still there, even though he has been very open about, the spiritual forces at work inside Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Anyway, he said that the Biden administration's response to the balloon was weak. President Xi will interpret it as such. The fact is, and this has been admitted now, the New York Times ran a story this past Thursday that the State Department confirmed that the government had spotted that balloon as it approached the Aleutian Islands on January 28th.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yet it wasn't until February 4th that they shot it down.
And they
after it crossed the whole country, flew over our missile silos in Montana, Whiteman Air Force Base, where the B-2 stealth bombers are housed here in Missouri, and onward. And
the governments say that they know for a fact that it was spying. It was gathering intelligence.
Right.
Over those military installations.
Yeah. Now, John Kirby, who's a spokesperson for the National Security Council, said, well, we took steps to mitigate how much information they could collect. All right, right.
Oh, did you now?
Yeah, but that wasn't what we were told at the time. And I understand if you're going to shoot down a balloon that's like 200 feet tall and weighs several tons, and potentially has explosives on board, which apparently it did, self-destruct mechanism, you don't want that coming down in an urban area. But if you knew it was flying over the Aleutian Islands...
Exactly. Take it down then.
Take it down then. Why let it cross the entire country first? Well... We can speculate, but of course we know, thanks to the so-called laptop from hell, that there are connections between Chinese government entities and the Biden family.
One of the first things I did when I saw how much attention that balloon was getting was take a look at the executive orders to see if Biden had signed anything quietly during those few days. He did not. According to the executive orders, there have been no new orders as of this year. So, but I don't know what else may have been going on. Usually when you see a story like this that is in the news for days, something else is sneaked past.
Right, yeah. Look over here. It's the art of sleight of hand.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stories that have been in the news for days and days, and this story should be, that is last week, you'll remember that on P.I.D. Radio, we had the wonderful guests, Dr. Judd Burton and Dr. Aaron Judkins, and we talked about our upcoming tour of Turkey in October of this year. And we discussed sites that are in southern Turkey.
Yeah. Göbekli Tepe,
what happened
Haran, so on.
2 days later.
Boom,
7.8 and then a 7.5, I think.
Those areas were among the hardest hit. Some of the sites that we're seeing, Malatya, Gaziantep, Haran even, Şanlıurfa, have been just absolutely devastated. So we've been in contact with the tour company, Sojourn Turkey, and they said that they themselves are okay because they're located further west in Turkey. But 4 of their team members have family members who, as of Wednesday of this week, had not yet been found. They were missing in those areas.
Oh, my goodness. So please pray for the people at Sojourn Turkey. Pray for everyone in Turkey and Syria because millions of people have been dishoused.
Yeah. World Health Organization
go back into their houses.
It says as many as 23 million people may be affected by this quake.
Oh, my goodness.
And as of this recording, the death count is over 25,000.
Yes, and at least 75,000 people have been injured. So at least 100,000 people directly affected, indirectly because they've lost housing, lost access to just water, clean water.
Right.
Cholera is something that could happen pretty easily in these areas. Other diseases can go through. Earthquakes and disease go hand in hand. And we just really need to pray for everyone there. The UNESCO division of the United Nations has announced a couple of days ago that they plan to go in when it's safe and examine the UNESCO sites.
Yes.
And that includes Göbekli Tepe.
Göbekli Tepe, Mount Nemrut.
Mount Nemrut, which is an unusual place on a Turkey tour, along with Göbekli. A lot of our really cool destination sites were in southern Turkey.
Right. Antakya.
Yes.
There's another site there, ancient Antioch. So
yes.
we will know more in about a month. So if you had interest in that tour, we have not canceled it yet. But we've told the tour company that worst come to worst, we will reschedule because we do want to make this happen. This is really
we do.
Something we'd like to do before we're too old to travel.
Very much so. So keep this in mind. If it is too dangerous to go into those areas, because think about this. It isn't just that there were buildings that literally pancaked, but all the buildings around them have to be inspected, and some of them may be condemned. And that includes hotels.
Right.
Not just the sites we would visit, but also hotels, and the ability for a tour bus to get through safely, because a lot of the roads have been torn up.
Oh, yeah. We saw some video of a road that looks like it was now, one part of the road was now about 20 feet higher than the other part of the road.
Yes, exactly. So it's going to take a while. If we cannot go in October, we will plan for next year, and it may either be in October of 2024, or we may talk about adding it as an extension after Israel and Jordan.
We'll let you know as soon as we can. Again, probably mid-March before we can find out for sure from Sojourn Turkey.
Well, and maybe even later than that, because Derek and I, in mid-March, we leave for Israel.
True, yes. So if we don't know by the time we head for Israel, we'll know when we get back. So March or early April, perhaps. But if you're thinking, wow, this is... One of the things that still amazes me, and I know this is not really relevant in the grand scheme of things, but I'm just still amazed that we can fly to Ankara and then back from Istanbul, from Springfield, Missouri, for less than it cost us to fly to Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah. Currently, the prices are $1,000 each. So
and that's just stunning.
Yeah, it cost us, what was it, like $1,200 per person to fly to Dayton last year?
And Albuquerque was even more.
Yeah.
So flying internally in the U.S. was more expensive than flying to the other side of the world.
No, it's wonderful. Once you get on the other side of the world, you can fly just about to anywhere in Europe and the UK and spend $100.
Right, which is why we're considering the possibility of just adding this after going to Israel next March, because we've already got dates for March of 2024. We'll announce those in April.
We'll also announce the special guest.
Yes. So if we can put those together and just add a short hop flight from Tel Aviv to Ankara, then great. But a lot depends on how badly the infrastructure is damaged over there and how quickly it can be repaired.
It does indeed.
I'm sure that the tourism industry and the government of Turkey would like to see Western tourists return as soon as possible. They've been dealing with some real economic issues. Inflation in Turkey has been running between 50 and 80%.
It's huge. And Erdogan has called for an election this summer. It will be interesting to see how he does, because right now there are a lot of people who are angry with him.
Yeah. But he's a savvy politician. He is a survivor. He's like Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel in terms of his political instincts. And the video of him meeting with and hugging grieving mothers and children. I mean, that, whether he means it or not, politically speaking, that is really astute. So we'll see what happens. We will.
Well, here's an interesting thing that is connected to that earthquake and gets us into another discussion, and that is a Dutch seismologist named Dr. Frank Hogerbeets. He, a few days before the earthquake, mentioned that his research tying the activity in the sun to earthquake activity on Earth, he believed that there would be a 7-point-something earthquake in southern Turkey within a very short period of time.
Wow.
3 days later, there was a 7.8 followed by 7.5. And since then, there have been over 1,000 sort of aftershocks. And some of those are in the 5 region.
Yeah. Turkey is right on a fault line. I'll include a map of the seismic zones in the Middle East with the show notes so you can see what we're talking about. But there is a fault line that extends from the north end of the Dead Sea Transform, which is the fault line that runs from the Bekaa Valley in the north through the Jordan Valley. I mean, the reason the Jordan River's there, the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, is because there's right on top of that fault line.
Yeah.
There's a fault line that runs northeast from the north end of that fault through Turkey up towards Armenia and the mountains of Ararat, and that is the fault line that has been shaking since early Monday.
Yeah, there are a number of fault lines in Turkey, as with other. It's an interesting position where there I think 3 different plates that come together where Turkey sits, and Turkey is an extremely important area, and Erdogan knows it because Turkey controls the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles.
Which is the entrance between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, which controls Russia's access to the Mediterranean.
Yes, it does.
And Ukraine's. And 40% of the world's grain ships through there from Russia and Ukraine to the rest of the world. This has been a cause of major concern for much of the world that depends on wheat and sunflower seeds and, fertilizer coming from Ukraine.
Don't tell our birds about that.
And, yeah, we've got flocks of grackles that have found our sunflower seed stash.
Yeah.
Well, not the stash in the garage, but the stuff we put out for.
Oh, if they ever found the garage, forget it.
Yeah. Oh, our cars would be toast.
Oh, no, don't even want to think about that.
But yeah, a lot of grain flows from the ports of Odessa and other Black Sea ports for Ukraine through those straits controlled by Turkey out to the Mediterranean and then to places like Africa. Lebanon, in particular, is very dependent on grain from Ukraine and Syria and Russia.
Very much so. And that area also has a great wealth of minerals, has a great wealth of marble, and it also has a great wealth of petroleum products in the seas, in those areas. And so Russia, the Ukraine, the West, and by that I mean all of the Western European and United States and England, but all of them are doing excavations and claiming parts of those gas fields and oil fields. And I think that Turkey, because it sits there, try to get a pipeline going through here or try to get your tankers going through here, you have to play ball with us. And historically, that has been known as a very important region. In fact, Kanakkale, which sits right over the Marmara Sea, which is the entrance into these straits.
Yeah, the Dardanelles.
Yes, the Marmara is where Troy was.
Right.
Troy sat right over that whole area, controlling it. 2
famed cities from history. Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, not Constantinople. Great song.
I know.
That controls the entrance between the Sea of Marmara and the Black Sea. And Troy, Wilusa in the ancient world, or Kanakkale today, is right at the entrance. So strategically positioned, both of them. And both very key in the history of the ancient world.
Actually, when we speak with Sojourn again, we might want to ask if the ruins of Troy are accessible to tourists.
Yeah, that part of Turkey was not really affected. So, and in fact, Troy is not that far from the church's Revelation.
I know.
So that would be an interesting addition or side tour while we're already in that area. Yeah, if we can't get to
some of the things in the south, maybe we could look at more things in the north. But if you're interested in going to Turkey, just hang in there because everything will go back to normal, but it may take a year.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Yeah. Hard to imagine something like this happening here. The closest thing in my lifetime that I can recall was the Northridge quake in the Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
And then there was one that, as I recall...
Well, there was the quake back in California. I mean, the one along the San Andreas. So think of that fault that runs through southern Turkey as the San Andreas. It's a very similar.
They were overdue. And as you say, this Dutch seismologist, Frank Hugerbeets, or however you pronounce it, I'm looking at his Twitter feed right now. And
He
pretty
did.
much. He was maybe a little bit to the southwest of where the actual epicenter was, but that area where he pinpointed the quake near Antakya, that region was definitely hard hit.
Oh, so much so. And that gets into the discussion of activity in the sun. Prophetically speaking, we're told to look for signs in the sun and the moon. So what's going on with the sun right now? 11-year cycle that now is thought to be actually part of a 22-year cycle that's actually thought to be of a much longer cycle, that the periodicity of it is still debated. And the idea that higher activity, which is really high in the sun right now, it's going to peak next year, and it's an extremely strong. So in the 22-year cycle, it's hitting a peak. In the 11-year cycle, it's hitting a peak. In that long period, which could be hundreds of years, it's hitting a peak. So we've got a very active sun right now. Ironically, 10, 15 years ago, you and I were talking about P.I.D. radio about how blank it was. There was just nothing going on. So is Hogerbeats right? Is the sun one of the components within that equation that leads to an earthquake?
He may well be right, and if so, it just emphasizes the point that guys who create these models, both for earthquakes and for climate, global climate, don't really understand all the dynamics.
No, they want to discount the sun, almost every one of them.
Right.
And yet I would argue that it has a great deal to do with what happens here.
They also don't account for cloud cover on Earth, and they've admitted this now in the modeling that they've done to show that we're overheating the Earth. They didn't account for the reflectivity of the cloud cover in many of their models that were used to show that we're on the verge of, rain bombs and boiling oceans, to quote Al Gore. That's just not the case.
When I was studying inorganic chemistry back in Indiana many, many years ago, the professor was talking about the ozone layer and how fluorocarbons were killing everything. And so all of us who used hairspray went from the little thing where it had a propellant inside, the fluorocarbons, and we went to just these little squirt bottles, which were really a pain to use. And now I notice that we're back to the propellant model of hairspray and other hair products. But since then, instead of getting bigger, the ozone layer has actually improved. That big hole has closed for the most part. Was it because the Earth reacted? No, I would say probably has something to do with the sun. But the bottom line is, it is the Lord who actually controls and keeps everything within his hand. He holds all things together, and he controls those elements that lead to our weather. We've got a prophecy of the angels holding back the winds.
Yep.
That means that he has control of the winds.
We've got angels of the waters mentioned too.
And maybe angels that are actually involved in earthquakes. I would also argue that they have been angels involved in the rescues in Turkey.
Given some of the video we've seen, we've been watching a lot of ITV, rather Sky News.
Sky News, but also looking at the videos on Twitter.
Right. Some of those rescues coming 72, 96 hours, more
than 100 sometimes.
Yeah.
Mother and child, a baby whose mother died, but she had given birth to this child.
Yes.
The child's been named Miracle.
Yeah. The child was still connected by the umbilical cord. The mother giving birth as the quake hit.
Yes. That baby survived.
Miraculous.
Yes.
Small children being pulled, and just the men weeping as they find people in the rubble, sometimes alive, often not. It's wintertime there, so it's cold.
Yes,
so they're dealing with days without food or water and in freezing cold. And they were indoors, so it's not like they were dressed to be in that weather.
They need food, they need water, they need clothing to protect them, they need tents. The UN is setting up permanent, semi-permanent tents that are really durable. But think about babies. They need formula if they don't have a mother. They need, or they need a wet nurse, but they also need diapers.
Yep.
Diapers.
Basic.
So where are you going to put all those? You don't have a functioning trash removal system.
Or water supply.
For
basic hygiene.
I know. That's why I mentioned earlier that probably we'll see an outbreak of cholera.
Boy, it's just...
It is horrific, and it's a reminder when I watch those videos that the men who are rejoicing and singing and those who are wailing from grief, these are human beings that are no different than you and I. Mm-hmm. No different. Many of them have a faith that is entirely different than yours and mine. Many of them live in a culture that is radically different than from the way Derek and I were raised. But at the basis, inside, mm-hmm. they are the same. They all have the Lord's Ruach. They all were created to be His imagers. Mm-hmm. It's just that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God.
One of the most powerful stories we saw this past week was when the Sky News presenter Mark Austin, who hosts their evening news program,
I love his show,
flew into Turkey, and when they arrived there, they met a man at the airport who had heard from, he's Turkish national, but he was living in Wales, and mm-hmm. he flew over from Wales and was trying to get to the mountain village where he was from because his sister, his brother-in-law, and their family had been affected, and the husband was missing, and his niece and nephew were still missing in the rubble. And he couldn't get to the village. There was no transportation, obviously. All rental vehicles had already been commandeered or taken. So this crew that came prepared and already had transportation agreed to take him to the village. Now, maybe that's Austin's reporter's instinct thinking that here's a human interest story to tell.
But it got him to the village.
It got this man to the village. And he told the story with sensitivity. Mm-hmm. And it just really illustrated for those of us on the other side of the world what this is like for the people who are caught in the middle of this. He said this man received a phone call from his niece on the way. She's a teen, but her younger brother and sister had been found in the rubble. And this man, as he gets the phone call and gets the news, begins to weep. Mm. So, it really drives home the story. It's hard for us looking through the window of a television screen or computer monitor or phone to really grasp the scope of what has happened there. The Turkey, for us Americans, to give you an idea, as you found the other day, looking this up, it's roughly the size of Texas and Louisiana combined. That's about how big the country is. And 23 million people in the zone affected by the earthquake. That is absolutely immense.
It's really huge. They have a large population, even though it's a big area. I saw a seismologist who looked at the possibility of future quakes and where they should rebuild. His position is that they should not have built where they did, all of these high-rise buildings that just pancaked. He says that the population of the region should be no more than 10 million.
The population affected by this is roughly the equivalent of the population of the state of Florida.
That's huge.
I mean, think about that.
That is huge.
Miami, Orlando.
Imagine
Tampa.
A hurricane going through Florida to affect the entire peninsula, and you've got, 23 million people that are suddenly homeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's... that is just stunning.
We cannot imagine the scope.
Illinois, Ohio, and Michigan, or Illinois and Ohio combined. It's
yeah. So pray for Turkey and Syria. Syria especially, they've been going through, 12 years of civil war?
Yeah.
They're worn down. They are just worn down.
And the area hardest hit is Idlib province, which is the area which is outside the control of the Assad government.
And they can't get in.
Right, because the rebels won't let them in, and... then trying to get outside aid in from the Turkish side. I don't know if there's any getting across or not, but it's a worst case scenario for the people in Idlib province.
It's really terrible.
Well,
yeah. I guess we should
take a break. We mentioned Russia and Ukraine. I want to touch on that just a little bit, and also on the symbolism of the Grammys and what we might see with the Super Bowl tomorrow. Yeah, that's ahead when P.I.D. Radio continues. Prepare for spiritual war by arming yourself with information. Take advantage of these specials through March that dig deep into the Bible to help you make sense of the chaos around us. First, our Veneration Bundle, our 2 co-authored books plus the travelogue DVDs from our Israel tours. An $85 value, just $45 plus shipping and handling. The Second Coming of Saturn Bundle, featuring my book and the 13-part companion DVD, a $50 value for just $35 plus shipping and handling. the This Is War special offer featuring the Second Coming of Saturn, 4 DVDs, and 7 hours of audio interviews with Bible scholar Dr. Michael Heiser, a $145 value for just $75 plus shipping and handling, and the Gilbert Fiction Collection, all 8 novels in Sharon's Red Wing Saga series plus my 2 novels, a $200 value for just $140 plus shipping and handling. These offers are available through March only at our online store, gilberthouse.org/store. And again, we thank you for your prayers and support. Welcome back to P.I.D. Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we're delighted you have chosen to hang in there with us. We haven't scared you away yet, but we will do our best to fulfill that.
Yes, still ahead. We'll get to the Build Barn Better
Build
project.
Barn Better. That'll be at the end.
Yeah. This week, President Zelensky of Ukraine made a surprise diplomatic tour of European nations. He appeared, was it Tuesday or Wednesday? Wednesday, I guess it was, at Westminster Hall.
Yes, it was Wednesday because it preempted the Prime Minister's questions. I was kind of upset about that. I like my PMQs.
We had sort of a taste of Prime Minister's questions during the State of the Union address Sunday night.
Well, a little bit. It should be more like that, actually.
I agree.
I don't think it's every week.
Demeaning. You want to talk about demeaning? Having a president of the United States sit down on The View. But I digress. Anyway, Zelensky is a good politician. He is aware of the optics, and so he doesn't dress up. He's still wearing what you might consider battle gear, fatigues. Yeah, tactical pants and an olive drab sweatshirt, which I think plays well in the press. He appeared before a joint session of Parliament. House of Lords and the House of Commons came together, and it was a well-scripted but well-played moment where he gave a fighter helmet to the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Mm-hmm. Well done. His point is that now that we've got some main battle tanks coming, the UK is sending Challengers, Germany is sending Leopard 2s, we're sending M1A2 Abrams. Now he wants fourth-generation fighter jets, which would be British Typhoons and American F-16s. And Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was very quick to say that, yes, we're going to train Ukrainian pilots here, and the idea of supplying British fighter jets is not off the table. However, as that was happening, investigative journalist Seymour Hersh published a story at his Substack. Cy Hersh has been around a long time. He broke the story of the My Lai massacre in 1972. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, so he's been at this a long time. He posted a story on how the United States destroyed the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines using Navy divers, not SEALs, because they're special forces. And when you use special forces, Congress has to be briefed, which risks leaks.
Yes.
So to keep this from being leaked as it was, or Hersh wouldn't have the story, they used divers from a search and salvage command based in Florida. And that allowed them to proceed with this mission, according to Hersh and his unnamed sources, without having to brief Congress on it. Apparently, according to Hersh, the explosives were planted on the pipelines during NATO exercises in the Baltic Sea. And then they waited some period of time so that it wasn't obvious. Like, if we blow up the pipelines within 24 hours of the exercises, it'll be pretty obvious.
Pretty obvious.
But look, the Russians aren't stupid. And there aren't many nations with the military capabilities to do what blew up the pipelines. And although the corporate media here in the West said, well, Russia probably did it despite Germany, Russia was making a lot of money by selling gas to Germany. The Germans didn't want to do it because their industry was really benefiting from having cheap energy sources. Mm-hmm. The Germans are really the ones, and Western Europe as a whole, are really paying the price. So if you follow the trail according to the principle of who benefits, there aren't many answers.
No, not at all.
Other than the United States.
Well, the Nord Stream 1 was the one that was actually bombed. Nord Stream 2, I think, has already been affected because of the
no, it was bombed too.
Oh, both of them were bombed.
Yeah. Nord Stream 1 was destroyed, and then some hours later, like 8 or 12 hours later, the Nord Stream 2, one of those 2 pipelines was bombed. So, yeah, they got them both.
And can they be repaired? You used to sell pipe that went to companies like this.
I don't know. I would say my gut says no, because those pipelines, even though they're lined on the inside they're lined on the outside. The insides are not intended to come into contact with salt water. So I think at this point, those pipelines are probably, and I could be wrong about this because this was not my area of expertise, but my guess is those pipelines are now just scrap on the bottom of the Baltic Sea.
Probably. Well, theoretically, they would have had gates.
Oop. Firehouse across the road responding to a call, I guess.
Oh, well, I pray that everybody's okay.
Yeah.
They probably I would think that they would have gates at various levels that if something happens that they could quickly shut off.
Yeah, it's possible. I did read a story saying that there were some who thought it might be repairable within a couple of months. I don't know. The question is, at this point, is there anything to salvage?
Of course, Seymour Hersh is being, lampooned and just attacked in the Western press because how dare you say that the U.S. had anything to do with this?
Yeah.
He has been so respected. And because he actually does due diligence when he covers a story, he doesn't print until he knows what he's saying is supportable.
Yeah. He doesn't always name his sources, and he's been criticized for that. But come on, I mean, the people who are leaking this kind of information to him have a lot more at stake than he does for printing it. So without those sources, things like the Pentagon Papers would never have come to light.
Right. Now, is it possible his sources are, provocateurs?
Possibly.
Yeah, I suppose it's possible. But the bottom line is the official story in the news isn't always the truth.
And in fact, the official story is almost always wrong.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We may never get any official confirmation of this, but the fact that President Biden said during a press conference long before the bombing, if Russia invades, this was before last February 24th when Russia crossed the border, we will end the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And the reporter asked him to clarify, and he said, we have the means to do it.
Yes. Well, there is a pipeline, and there are also tankers that come from the Black Sea.
Right.
Russia is a great source of petroleum products. There are other sources, too, including the United States.
And the intended consequence of blowing up that pipeline may not have been to punish Russia, because surely the planners and strategists inside Washington, D.C. are aware that China and India were more than willing to buy up the surplus, buy up the slack, which is exactly what's happened. Russian oil revenues have actually gone up since that attack, and despite the sanctions, because India is buying Russian oil at a discount, turning around and reselling it to Western Europe. So that Russian oil is still making it into Europe. It's just going through India, and India is profiting from this because India is part of that alliance. The
part of BRICS.
Yeah, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but soon to include Saudi Arabia.
And Egypt.
And perhaps Argentina. They've also expressed an interest, and possibly Iran. The world is seeing, and this is the larger point of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, the world is seeing a bifurcation in the global financial system. The United States had control of it through the SWIFT system, which was the system that banks use to transfer money from one bank to another. Russia's been cut out of SWIFT. So the Russians and the Chinese are working on their own system. Saudi Arabia, unhappy at the way the Biden administration has treated them, basically saying, we'll take oil purchases in any currency now.
Yes, it has traditionally been the petrodollar.
For 50 years, since 1972, when Nixon took the U.S. dollar off the gold standard, we reached an agreement with the Saudis to require oil purchases from Saudi Arabia in U.S. dollars. So the dollar has always been supported by the oil being pumped out of Saudi Arabia. It is the petrodollar. That's the origin of that term. Well, now we're seeing the rise of the petro yuan, the Chinese currency.
And the petro ruble, because Russia wants that alternative SWIFT system to be paid in rubles.
Right. And Europeans are saying, well, we're not doing that. But what they would do is they would deposit the money into a bank, and the bank would exchange the euro for ruble. And so they're playing word games.
I know.
But the reality is you've got one part of the world that is saying, look, Russia and the BRICS nations, Russia controls a lot of natural gas, a lot of fertilizer, and they need fertilizer in the global south especially. So we're going to side with them rather than allowing the Americans to keep dictating the way we live.
The entire globe is ready for regional and global war. If England gives Typhoons, fighter jets, to Ukraine, which is what Zelensky asked for. He has pilots that are training on the NATO planes right now in England. And those pilots will be trained to fly Typhoons or any NATO plane, which means to me that they're going to get them. Suddenly, England is drained of resources. The United States is drained of resources. Germany has figured out, wait a minute, why are we giving all our resources away?
Right. There was a story published this week by one of the Substack bloggers that I look at, and he said there's been just a deafening silence from other European nations as Germany said, okay, we'll send some of our Leopard 2s and we will authorize the nations that have purchased the Leopard 2 battle tank from Germany to export those to Ukraine. When you look at the numbers involved here, though, military experts estimate that Russia has about 12,000 tanks in total and could deploy as many as 10,000 of those.
Along with 500,000 soldiers.
Along with 500,000 soldiers to Eastern Europe. Maybe not necessarily just Ukraine. Perhaps they go to the Baltic states. Perhaps.
Yes. That doesn't include Belarus, who could also line his border.
Right. United States has about 6,000 tanks total. That's worldwide. They're not all in Europe. Then when you start looking at what Europe actually has to contribute in the way of main battle tanks, you start looking for numbers. You get Ukraine with about 1,800, but that's before the war. Don't know how many of those are still functional. Poland has several hundred. You're going down the list, in terms of numerical order, it's not until you get between 41 and 50 that you get to Germany, France, and the UK. United Kingdom's Challenger tanks, its total tank fleet is just slightly larger than that of Kyrgyzstan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. They don't have that many tanks.
No.
So even though the battle tanks that Russia may deploy, some of them may include the older T-55s and T-72s. The T-90 is their most recent. The fact is they've got such a numerical superiority, it doesn't matter.
But also remember, China could join the club.
And they already have, according to the story that came out this past week about China supplying real-time battlefield intel to Russia, which we have already admitted doing to Ukraine.
Well, exactly. Now that gets us back to the balloon idea. And you had talked about previously the satellites that are being used in low Earth orbit by China, by a private company, supposedly. There is no such thing in China.
Right.
That is supplying the intel to Chinese military sources. But I would argue that there are these balloons. Our own government has admitted that those balloons have been used for a long time.
Yeah, getting back to that story. That was an interesting part of the State Department's briefing on Thursday, where they said, well, China's got a fleet of these balloons that have overflown 40 countries on 5 continents. Wait a minute. You guys didn't just learn this since you shot down that balloon on Saturday. Why?
It's because we have balloons too.
We have balloons too, but also because they didn't want to... well, the fire truck's back, so I guess that's good.
Yay.
During the course of this podcast, that truck left and is now backing back into the garage across the street.
I'm glad to see that. Maybe it was something small, like they went to a, lawnmower fire. Yes, those fine gentlemen who are the volunteer firefighters, that firehouse is right across the street from us. I ran over there and let them know that our lawnmower was on fire.
Yeah, it was...
our first summer here.
Wow. Well, the lawnmower just caught on fire. It just went up in flames.
Yeah, so I would talk to people and they go, you live where... You're the lady that got the lawnmower on fire? Yes.
Yeah, very prominent. We were going to keep it out there as a planter, but then some guy came along and said, you doing anything with that? It's like, scrap metal? Yeah, okay, look, fine, load it up, take it away.
I know, but back to balloons. Yes, the world is ready, as with a balloon, to pop. And I think that will lead us into World War III. In fact, I would argue that World War III has already begun. We just don't know it yet.
In all but name.
Yeah.
I agree.
It is Moldova, by the way, which is right in that Black Sea region, has said that two nights ago, a missile fired from the Black Sea, a Russian missile, overflew Moldova. They are not happy about it. And I think it was either the same day or the next day that the PM in Moldova suddenly resigned.
Yeah.
Now, she was very Western friendly, but the gentleman who's coming in is also Western friendly. And by that we mean that they will
NATO. They will play ball. Yeah. Moldova is in a tough spot. It's landlocked. It doesn't have a whole lot going on there. My ancestors on my mother's side, when they left Germany in the late or early 19th century, moved to the region around Odessa and then moved north and west from there, were in that region between Moldova and Ukraine, and left around 1894, thankfully, because things got really ugly there in the 1930s with Stalin starving Ukrainians to death by the millions. So, living in North Dakota in sod houses was a better option.
By the way, another thing that occurred because of the balloon, Antony Blinken was supposed to go to China the very next day. He canceled.
There are some who speculated that the whole flap over the balloons was to kind of push his hands, was kind of force Blinken to cancel.
That's interesting.
To keep tension between the U.S. and China ramped up.
You told me something very interesting this morning that you may have talked about already on your 5 and 10 or on VFTB, and that is that the RAND Corporation think tank, they had recommended some sort of Eastern European conflict to allow Russia to exhaust its resources. Yeah,
this was back in 2019. The RAND Corporation has been around a long time, and they're very hawkish. They were all in favor of the Vietnam War and our intrusions into Cambodia by the U.S. government back in the 1960s and early 70s. In 2019, they advocated weakening Russia through a prolonged conflict, and specifically in Ukraine. I mean, this is something that's been building for a while. The conflict that took place there back in 2014 with the Orange Revolution, where a pro-Russian president was forced out by protesters who were financed by
Maidan.
No, Maidan was the more recent.
I thought Maidan was in 2014.
I don't think so. I think that was the more recent during the Obama administration.
But anyway,
no, I'm sorry. You are correct. My bad. The Orange Revolution was earlier than that during the Bush administration.
Yes.
So you're correct. Thank you.
My brain sometimes does work, not always.
Yeah.
Yours usually is sharper than mine.
The Maidan uprising began in late 2013 and culminated in February of 2014, so almost 8 years ago exactly, when a pro-Russian, that was Yanukovych, was forced out for Petro Poroshenko, who was succeeded by Vladimir Zelensky. These protests, the Orange Revolution and the Maidan uprising, were financed by George Soros, basically. And that's one of the things that really opened my eyes, because the first uprising, the Orange Revolution, Soros was involved in that, but that was during the Bush administration, and the Orange Revolution and the Open Society Initiative that financed it were getting funds from the U.S. Department of State. So if Soros is a flaming liberal and George W. Bush was a conservative, what's the, why are they financing this?
Puppets, finger puppets on hands.
Head explode.
Yeah.
It kind of reshaped my paradigm. It's like, oh, wait, they're all on the same side. It's like pro wrestling.
It is very much like that. And the bottom line is that all of these entities are being controlled by spirits.
Right.
Whether they know it or not.
And that kind of leads into the Grammys.
The Grammys.
This really shouldn't surprise us.
Before we get to the Grammys, can I just talk about the Brit Awards, which are tomorrow?
Well, I'm going to include that all in the same thing.
Thank you.
Kind of a broader sense of the discussion that I had with Christopher Knowles last Sunday night
that was
on
a
A View from the Bunker.
Program. He's so good.
It's really gotten a lot of traction as people were really interested in what he had to say, which is that the old state blood cults, state-sponsored blood cults, are being reintroduced into our society under the cover of woke.
Well, yes.
And imagery and art are being used to bring this cult to public attention. To wit, the statue that we talked about overlooking Madison Square, that statue called Now, that was supposed to, is ostensibly, allegedly, a tribute to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but is actually Inanna. Also, there are many examples of this, and Chris went through a number of examples.
And it gets into the idea of public pagan pageantry, that you can teach an idea by reinforcing it constantly through visual representations.
Madonna at the Grammys had a unique hairstyle. She had the same kind of coiled braids that we see on that statue in New York.
Yeah, she
now, I don't know
odd.
if that was... She did look odd. She's had work done. She's 64, God bless her, but...
She's trying to look 24.
She's trying to look 24, and she would look prettier if she had just let herself age naturally.
I agree.
You are prettier than Madonna. And you are not trying to modify your work, your face with all this work, plumpers and fillers and line erasers and Botox.
I like my lines. It shows that I've lived a life.
Yeah, and she has lived a life, sadly, that has influenced countless thousands, millions of other lives to follow a path of hedonism, decadence, and occultism through her devotion to the Kabbalah and various other things. So anyway, she looked sort of like that, but the main imagery projected were the duo was by the duo who won the Best Pop Duo Award of the year, Sam Smith and Kim Petras. Smith identifies as non-binary. She identifies, he, because Kim Petras is actually a man, but he lives as a woman. Best known prior to his musical career for being the youngest transgender person in German history. Made the change at age 16, now late 20s. The song was called Unholy, and that's the best way to describe it.
Yes.
Yeah, the imagery, I've not seen the official music video, don't care to, but the performance on the Grammys, lit in red, kind of like Joe Biden's speech at Union Station in Philadelphia or Penn Station or whatever that was, to create a certain mood. He was wearing a top hat with horns on it, which obviously conveys the image.
Not Biden, but...
Not Biden, no, Sam Smith. To convey the image that he is, in fact, Satan, and he's surrounded by dancers who are scantily clad and dancing like demons and very aggressively sexual overtones. And it's been described by a lot of Christian commentators as satanic. I think... based on the research that we've done over the past few years, especially your research into Inanna, that's not specific enough. Yes, it is small s satanic in the fact that it was unholy. But here you've got a song glorifying unrestrained carnality being performed by a non-binary male and a male living as a female.
This is the same as the pageantry that was so popular going all the way back to pre-flood civilization, used where there's evidence of it post-flood. The symbols on the walls, the paintings, the statuary, clearly these ideas were repeated again and again and again, like meme posters, so that people would start to, in their minds, relate the fact that they are part of this. They have to behave this way. This is normal. This is what you do to please the gods. You will live a better life if you do these things. This is simply how the world is. Worshiping a deity is how the world is. We're getting back to that. It will be very open soon. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we saw at the Grammys this past Sunday night was a tribute to Inanna, the spirit of the age.
Which takes us to the Brit Awards.
Yes.
I noticed that this morning because Derek and I watch a lot of British TV, and I watch a lot of news from all around the world, but the British Sky News, I like many of the reporters on there. And they mentioned the Brit Awards, which you Brits listening, you all are like, yeah. It's an entertainment award system that, like everything else, has pageantry with it, and that includes the Olympics and all the award shows, and frankly, many of the governmental behaviors, like, the big speeches and those things, and the big set pieces where you'll have the president in a certain background, that looks sort of like Pergamum. Remember the Obama thing, and he was in that big temple?
Yeah, it looked like the great altar of Zeus.
It did indeed. Well, the awards do this. The Brit Award apparently changes design every year, and so an artist is commissioned to design a new piece. And this year's has a really strange look to it.
Looks a lot like those reptilian figurines from ancient Ur.
Yes, it's got those coffee bean eyes. But there are 3 faces on it.
3 faces, like Hecate. Yeah.
And 3 hands. I haven't been able to find them, but the artist claimed there were 3 hands on it.
I'd have to see a top view of the...
Well, here's what the thing is. It could be that it was a misreported, not hands, but heads.
Yeah, it
Because
looks
there are
heads.
three faces.
I'm looking at the three angles showing the three separate faces on the statue, and there are two hands.
Do they all have coffee bean eyes?
They all do. Yeah, take a look.
That is just so weird.
That will be the featured image for the story, or for our show notes for today. The coffee bean eyes, but the three.
That last one is really scary. The one where it's smiling.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's not a happy smile.
No, that looks like something from a Stephen King movie.
It's an evil smile.
Yeah.
It is very much like those Ophidian, which is the scholarly term for reptilian or
Snaky.
snake-like statues found near ancient Eridu and ancient southeastern Iraq.
That's where archaeology pays off.
Right. Very close to Eridu is where we argue the Tower of Babel was located. And these statues date to a pre-flood era, probably 5,000 BC or so. We don't know for sure what they were used for because scholars have never found any texts that explain what those little figurines were used for. Did they represent the Anunnaki? Don't know.
Some of them either have a space where there was a baby,
Yes.
or they actually have the baby still intact.
Which makes no
Reptilian
sense.
mother with a human
With a suckling child.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Reptiles are not like mammals.
They do not lactate.
No.
So very, very strange. But again, another example of how these images are being pushed into the public square by artists who may not even be aware of the principalities and powers working through them.
I would bet most of them are not.
Right.
And that is really tragic. We all have free will. Each one of us gets to make the choices that will lead to our permanent residence in eternity. Now is the time to make that before you take your final breath.
Right.
So if you don't know Jesus yet, if you're listening to this just because you tuned in for something in the headline or whatever, please consider Jesus, because he truly did die to cover every one of your bad choices, every one of our sins. And it is only his blood that will qualify us to spend eternity with the creator of everything. Otherwise, you will be in a position where you are surrounded by demons. You are surrounded by those who made poor choices. You are surrounded by those fallen entities who rebelled. And it will not be a happy place.
No.
There are those who think, oh, well, I want to go to hell because that's where all the cool people are.
No,
you don't want to go there.
it does not require a degree in theology to understand the doctrine by which we are saved. Paul made this very clear. I think sometimes we Christians, trying to show how much smarter or holier we are than others around us, are really doing our Lord a disservice. We are not the best ambassadors for his kingdom.
We have a list.
Yeah.
Follow my list.
Follow my list. Here's my rules. But Paul said, no, it's very simple. In the letter to the church at Corinth, 1 Corinthians is just an amazing letter. 1 Corinthians 15,
so
one of the most incredible chapters in the entire Bible. Our friends Preston and Kelly Condra wrote a book on this, By Which We Are Saved, is the title. Paul wrote, now I would remind you, brothers, this is 1 Corinthians 15, beginning at verse 1, and the word brothers in Greek means brothers and sisters, of the gospel I preach to you, which you received, in which you stand, and by which you are being saved, if you hold fast to the word I preached to you, unless you believed in vain, meaning you just did it for the day just to, be part of a group and then just kind of threw it off. But here's the money quote, verse 3, for I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures. That's it.
Yes.
Just accept that historic fact, and that's the gospel right there. And then he goes on to describe the importance and explain the importance of the literal resurrection from the dead of Jesus and why that is so central to the gospel. But if you just accept that historic fact, he died for your sins, and on the third day, in accordance with the prophecies, he rose again. That's it.
That's it. That is really it. You have to recognize that you are a sinner. So that's A, accept that you are a sinner. B, believe that Jesus died for you.
Yeah.
Talk to him. Tell him you want him to come into your life and change it. You want him to cover you with his blood, with his righteousness. And confess. Confess your sins. Confess to the world. Say, I've accepted Jesus. Because it's by professing with your mouth. I believe our spoken word is important. Now, mind you, if you're unable to talk, it doesn't mean you can't accept Jesus.
Right.
Because he knows your heart.
It's not a magic...
It's a heart thing.
Yeah.
It's the idea that there are some who say, and here's where you get the list, that you have to have a works-based religion. You have to achieve everything, get your little check marks along the list, and then once you're done, you're in. That's not how it works. You accept your condition, you believe in Jesus, and you confess to him that you want to be with him forever. And that's the glory of it all.
Right.
A child can do this. It's not a list. But if you truly have believed, if the Holy Spirit really is in your heart, making changes day by day by day, it will show in your life.
Right.
You will be making a confession through your behavior.
And some people will find certain things that they no longer want to do. Others will find there are certain things they must avoid because they recognize those as weak spots, temptations to fall back into old bad behaviors. The
Holy Spirit works with each person.
Right. The old operating system is being overwritten, rewritten.
Oh, I would argue the operating system is replaced entirely.
The files need
by
to
the
be,
Holy Spirit. The old files are there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the flesh that Paul talks about.
1 Corinthians 15, which then goes on to apologetics, explaining how we can know that this is true, eyewitnesses to the risen Christ, and then explains why all this is important when you get to the end of that chapter, because this is all about who gets resurrected at the end.
Oh, that is one. I love that. I so love that. Did you want to read that before I go on with something I wanted to say?
I was just basically recommending it for reading.
Dr. Michael S. Heiser has been preaching apologetics for a long, long time. He's written many opinions and in translator's notes at Faith Life Bible. He has an entire body of work that is better than almost anybody that I can name in the academic world. He has in many ways served as the translator between academia and us. And Michael S. Heiser is where I would point you if you want to find apologetics and someone who explains in common language what the Bible means.
Yeah. There are those who find it impossible to accept the Bible as it's written because they see or perceive think that Jesus of the New Testament is different from the angry, vengeful God of the Old Testament instead of seeing them as one.
Right.
His book, The Unseen Realm, and sort of the introductory version of that book called Supernatural explains that there are other entities at work in the unseen realm, in the spirit world, who are trying to destroy humanity. And they convinced certain groups of people to side with them. And when you understand that, suddenly the difficult portions of the Old Testament become easier to understand.
Don't they, though? Well, Dr. Heiser is in, I suppose you could say he's in perhaps his final days and weeks. He's at home now in hospice. He's been dealing with pancreatic cancer for a couple of years now. And he announced about 2 weeks ago, maybe, that he was going home to prepare to go home,
right?
Capital H home. And since then, on his Facebook page, he has been, or someone has been helping him to post those things that I think are on Mike's mind right now that he wants to make sure he says. And as of this morning, he puts up, Gentiles are included in the family of God. They too are covenant people. I love that. He's trying to simplify what frankly are very complicated issues, because the world of the Lord, his creation, is incredibly complicated and so much more intricate than we could ever imagine. The spiritual warfare that has been going on since probably before Adam and Eve were created, that is very complicated, but it boils down to simple things. Jesus saves.
Yep. Amen. Amen. Well, we told you at the beginning of the program we would discuss how we could build Barn better.
Yeah, and, our barn.
We will share that with you.
Part of the Barna group. The barn group. We have a shop building on our property. When we bought the house,
8 years ago, it wasn't because the building was there. It was because this was conveniently located. It's easy to get into Crane to, close to the Skywatch TV studios and warehouse. It was a great price.
Really.
And the location where out of our back windows, we see rolling hills, often with cattle pastured back there.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Sometimes they come up to the back fence about 150 feet behind our back window. And, we just go out on the deck and wave to the cows. Well,
I talk to them.
Steers, yeah.
Some are steers, some are cows. You'll have cow-calf out there sometimes.
So that was the reason for it. So this 1,200 square foot building has mainly served as storage for 8 years. But we've gotten to a point where we need to take back some of the rooms in our house because we're in one bedroom. The shipping office for our books and DVDs is another bedroom. We've got two other bedrooms at our studios. And we've moved the Unraveling Revelation studio out into our family room.
Gilbert House has outgrown our house.
So we're in the process of cleaning it out so that we can have it insulated, have the wiring run that we need to run the HVAC system out there, and then set up just very basic studio space so we can record Unraveling Revelation out there. We can record some teachings and presentations in there. We can move the books and everything out there, put the shipping office out there. All in all, the estimates come up to about $15,000 if you're so led. And we will do this without going into debt. Either we will do it or we won't, but we think that we will and that we've got the resources to do it. We just we do not want to go into debt. We've learned that lesson from Tom Horn in the growth of Skywatch TV. He has paced the growth of Skywatch TV and Whispering Ponies Ranch to the available resources.
Right, exactly. And if it ever looked like it was growing too fast, he'd pull back.
No point in putting the whole ministry at risk of having to shut down because you've got a monthly mortgage payment that is now suddenly much larger because you were jumping out ahead of where God wanted you to go. So that is our Build Barn Better project. It's technically not a barn, but
Well, actually, they do call those barns. They call them pole barns.
Well, that's true. Okay, so I was wrong. It is accurately a barn, and we are building Barn Better. Need to replace the storm windows that pass for windows in there so that we can insulate it better. But once all that's done, we'll move most of our operations out there, and then when family comes to visit, we can actually have them in bedrooms instead of on couches.
Imagine that. That's going to be awesome. Well, if you are led to help out with that, gilberthouse.org/donate is the link. If you are interested in traveling with us, it's gilberthouse.org/travel is your link. You can just go to gilberthouse.org and look around.
Yeah.
Got a store there and all kinds of stuff.
Right. And of course, our app, the link for the app is there, but the app gets you all of that as well. The podcast episodes are at the website, but also on the app.
Yep. Our Bible studies on Sundays. And VFTB. Old VFTBs, old P.I.D. radios are on the app. It's crazy.
Yeah. Going to be updating the app shortly with a new category devoted to interviews recorded at the prophecy conferences. Starting 10 years ago, 2011, actually, with the Branson Future Congress.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I don't know if you're listening today, but Oliver, if you happen to be listening, Derek, Dede, is going to say hello to you.
Oh, well, I just sent him a video last night.
Did you? Yeah, oh, well, say hi to him again.
Well, Ollie, it's glad you're listening today, and just want you to know that Sharon and I love you.
We do.
And your videos always make us very happy. So keep sending those.
It's this toddler who, for whatever reason, really identifies with Derek.
He's a remarkable little boy. And these videos that he sends are just so joyful. So we're delighted to see those and just honored to have had the opportunity to meet him, his parents, and his brother when they came through the Ozarks last year. So
true. So thank you, Lord. We just really appreciate the way the Lord works through the silliness that we do sometimes. But if we get things right and the Lord expands that idea through others, then we're grateful for that. When we get things wrong, which we do, that's on us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it. Tomorrow night on A View from the Bunker.
Oh, yes.
I have pulled video from an interview with Mike Heiser.
Oh, good.
Yeah, this was recorded in July of 2021 for the Bible's Greatest Mysteries program.
You know, he came to see us, and we just only found out then that he was sick. Or maybe it was right after that.
It was after that, yeah. And this was a Skype interview, so he was not here in the Ozarks. This was
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
but
right.
this was a month before he announced the diagnosis. But he was already suffering from it at that point. He didn't make any mention of it while I was talking to him.
He was getting thinner.
Yeah. So it was originally broadcast in 4 15-minute segments. This has been pieced together, so it's one solid interview, and it's the foundational stuff that Mike has been teaching for years.
It's
Why
so
are the giants in the Bible important? What was the significance of Mount Hermon? And so on.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really basic Mike Heiser 101, and that'll be tomorrow night's View from the Bunker, available on YouTube, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/GilbertHouse, or just go to our app and get the app, and you can watch or listen to it there.
I love that.
Till next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert. Bye-bye, everybody.
P.I.D. Radio is an outreach of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, PIDradio.com, Twitter @PIDradio, or by downloading our free app, PIDradio.com/app, or GilbertHouse.org/app. Join us each week for our Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship.